Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we're going to cover the three Star Wars Unlimited tournament that happened during the GenCon 2024. So just like for the UK Game Expo, we got three kind of smaller tournaments. Instead of doing one big event, they decided to break it down in three tournaments that are about 120 players. So it's very similar to structure to the UK Game Expo, and because it's the first major tournament that happened since the release of the new expansion, it's a very good tournament to cover. So we get better information about the meta and all the game is being played, especially in the US, which has, in my opinion, a slightly different meta than what we have in the UK, as this is in the EU. As I was kind of like looking over the results of smaller tournaments. And even they were quite different from the meta was also quite different from the first 1K tournaments that we saw earlier as well. So the information that we have and the list that we have is a little bit incomplete because it's kind of been patched up by the community. Thank you to Cody Kressmann, who is the person who gathered up some of the lists that I'm going to be covering today. So the good thing is going to make it for a shorter video though. First of all, let's talk about day one, and this is the top 8 in day one, and on the right hand side you got everybody who did 5-2 or over. So we're gonna look at both of those things. So in the top 8, I was calling Sabine Green, Sabine ECL the best deck in the meta. And I think a lot of people agree with me, and I think on day one it very much reflected. As you can see, we got 3 Sabine, no, 4 Sabines in the top 8, but half Sabine Yellow, yeah, 4 Sabine top 8, 2 Sabine Yellow, and 2 Sabine ECL. Sabine Yellow really playing quite a role in this top 8. But if you look at the wider results, you can see that the Sabine ECL was very much in majority. We got I don't know, like 4 or 5 more Sabine ECLs in there. We got only 1 more Sabine Yellow, I believe. So yeah, Sabine ECL really proving to be quite dominant in this first day of the tournament. But obviously there's a lot of diversity here. Boba being almost completely absent of this first top 8. I think only 2 or 3 Bobas. I mean, there's a couple of missing lists out of those 25 players, and only 1 Boba in the top 8. So that explains that, because Boba is one of the decks that has the best matchup versus Sabine. So no Boba means more Sabine performing. And we're going to see that trend later on as well in the other tournament where it goes the other way around, where there's more Boba and less Sabine. And we're a couple of interesting decks making a breakthrough. Han Yellow is taking the win with Troy Yamaguchi, so well done to him. And we're going to take a look at his list. I've been quite skeptical with the hold Han in this, mostly because I've been playing Han Green, but then I switched over to Han Yellow. Actually, in one of my very first videos, I showed some first list of Han Yellow. And I've been playing with Han Yellow a lot more, and I believe Han Yellow works a lot better than Han Green. I'm going to be explaining why later in that video. And then we see Jeremiah Austin doing a top 7 performance here with Han Blue, which is basically kind of the similar decks that that a YouTuber called Wu made on his channel. I don't know if it's the exact same day because I don't have the exact list, but it is basically kind of like what you would expect from a Ray deck. So the usual blue, white, red shell, but basically focused more on Han to gain some speed, because but we'll go over that later on. But that's obviously kind of not a surprising meta in my opinion. I think most of those decks were what you would expect. You also had Krennic in the second position here. Krennic's green still very much there, and yeah. So we move on to. I picked up a couple of lists that I found to be interesting. So we got his name Cody Bernardo playing Tarkin Yellow. Actually, Tarkin Yellow was not really represented. Did not see a lot of play in either tournament. I think it's a deck that is quite strong when you're not expecting it, but maybe the deck is a bit too known now that it is. People were kind of afraid to bring it up. We'll see on the long run how it performed. This time, the best performance it had during this tournament was a top 9 finish. But this list is quite a bit different from the talking vehicle that has initially been that I shown on my channel earlier. It doesn't, for example, play triple dark raid, which in my opinion is criminal. Like, in my opinion, this is the whole point of the deck, is to play triple dark raid. So this deck is less focused on the vehicles. As you can see, it doesn't play any of the reinforcement walker, all this thing. It plays the more classic kind of Darth Vader, and it does play sneak attack though. So how do I feel about this? Well, I feel that in my opinion, it doesn't really make any sense to be playing value tools like Darth Vader or Grand Moff Tarkin. I think, for example, cards that are meant to produce card advantage. Well, this is supposed to be an aggro deck. I don't think it's necessarily wrong to be playing like a big top 7 top ender to kind of like to have an immediate impact and deal a lot of damage. But I think if you're going to integrate this aspect into your deck, you would rather be playing a Dark Maul rather than Darth Vader, because Dark Maul actually deals damage to the base because of his overwhelm 7 attack. So personally, I think I fundamentally disagree with the idea of playing Vader in this deck. I think if I was ever going to be playing this a top 7, a 7th curve, I would be playing. And I fundamentally disagree with the idea of not playing Triple Dark Raid. I think Triple Dark Raid is by far the best card of this deck. It is it's so much better than Sneak Attack because you get because the deck plays so many vehicles that it makes it so you don't need to have both Sneak Attack and a card in your hand to be able. You just play Triple Dark Raid. You look at the top 7. You're very likely to find something. You don't need both of those cards, and at the end you will get the card back into your hand. So yeah, the rest of the deck is pretty much what the Talking deck was about. Was like playing those very powerful like 3 drops like 7-speed defenders and Lucky Time Phantoms, and then put some experience on it. This one is a bit more ACATs, General Reveres, and stuff like this. TIE Advance is not nearly as good without Triple Dark. And the entire reason why TIE Advance is good in the Ground Attack and Vehicle is deck is because Triple Dark Raid. So yeah, I mean, good for the deck, I guess, that it did top 9 finishes with a 5-2 record. So well done, but I don't think this is I completely disagree with most of the choices that were being made. Of course, those are very good cards. Vader is still a very good card. So, but I'm pretty sure you would do better with a vehicle list. That's at least is my personal opinion. But well done for performing with the deck. Moving on, we got Benjamin Busser, which I think was the only Boba Yellow in the list. I'm working with what I have in terms of list. And there's a couple of interesting things in that. So it's a pretty classic overall, pretty classic Boba Fett with the way it's been built. Interesting things though, it does not play Boba Fett's armor in the main deck, which I think is a meta call. If you're expecting a lot of aggro or a lot of hard control, I believe that Boba Fett's armor is indeed not really that good, but it's so good against everything else, especially against the hand deck that you're gonna see. That I think the card is very much worth running, in my opinion, even in the main deck, because there's just such a massive impact whenever you join in those specific matchups. So I decided to put inside board, which I think is acceptable. So then you got a couple of interesting things. You got the mercenary gunship to be a bit more aggressive in space right off the bat. We got the Toro Kalikan, which I think works pretty well if you're playing a few bounty hunters, which he does. He plays the Bosk, the 4 LOM as the Zuckus. Yeah, the rest of those is pretty classic. We got the Ultra DL44 Blasters, which I'm a pretty massive fan of personally. I've been playing this in my Boba Yellow version for a while. So, and a lot of bounce effect. We got 2 Waylays and a 3 Cantina Bouncer. And the Relentless Pursuit as a 2-of, which has been kind of like the trend lately as well. And the number 1 list is the list of Troy is Han Yellow deck, which is interesting. There's a couple of things that I was not necessarily expecting to see. Some small gold cards. You get the L337s, the DL44 Blasters, as well as the Million Falcon, really to kind of make up for the card advantage that Han Yellow is really suffering from being Han Yellow, just spending so many cards. But yeah, the rest of the deck is that's pretty classic. So L337 is something I've personally been playing in Han Yellow at the beginning, and then I switched over to something a little bit more impactful in the early stage of the game, notably the Wind Riders and the Greedos that can really trade with the opponent 3-drops. But I think the strategy with this specific deck for Troy is to try to play an Ezra Bridger or a DJ on turn 1, or even a tech on turn 1 to try to and really use Anne's ability extremely aggressively early on. Which is I think is a very good way to play it, so it's no complaint about that. Then something interesting is the Gamer Moran guards at the 4-drops. I think this is I've been personally thinking a lot about how I can improve the aggro matchup whenever I'm playing against whenever I'm playing against Sabine. And Gamer Worn Guard has been my personal answer. I've been running Gamer Worn Guards in Han Yellow in order to improve the matchup against the Sabine, and Troy thought about the same thing, and I think it's an excellent idea. It does help quite a bit against aggro to have a Sentinel in your deck, even though it's not like the most resilient Sentinel in the world, but it does the job in terms of kind of holding things up. It only does play one Syndicate Lackeys. I found Syndicate Lackeys to be spectacularly good against Sabine. I think overall I find Syndicate Lackeys to be very well positioned in the meta. There are so many 3/4s, 2/5s, 3/5s in the meta. Whether you're playing against Boba or whether you're playing against other hand players or against Sabine, makes Syndicate Lackeys a spectacular card. Yeah, then we got a couple of random jetpack. I'm relatively interested by the Cartel Turncoat. I don't know exactly why he's running Cartel Turncoat. It's like he doesn't really play any other 1-drop to go alongside Turncoat. I mean, he can play Leia turn 1, I guess, but that's like it's not really the kind of thing that you really want to do with this type of deck. So I'm not exactly sure why he's running Cartel Turncoat. I'd be interested to know exactly the reason behind running Cartel Turncoat. Only 2 Spark of Rebellion for the aggressive setup, and for dealing with control. Right now, control is pretty much non-existent in this meta. At least, hard control was absolutely non-existent. So that's obviously something that is to be expected from from the early meta. But yeah, so that's why only 2 Spark of Rebellion didn't feel like as big of a priority. In a cyber, a couple of interesting. We got the Smuggler's Aid, which I think is a card that is very playable in Han Yellow if you want to have a couple of heal in order to make your aggro matchup a little bit better. The Topias as well is a decent card, probably for the more mid-range. And then we've got a Confiscate to deal with, notably Boba Fett's armor, but notably anything that has like, a lot of upgrades and stuff. So yeah, overall it's pretty solid deck, pretty close to what you would expect. With a couple of changes here and there, but the core is very much there, and I think this deck is very solid. So now I'm going to talk about very briefly on why I think Han Yellow is the way to go instead of Han Green for moving forward. And I think the reason why that's the case is because of the game plan. The problem with Han Green is that it's a deck that is producing a lot of value, that is very good at kind of like outvaluing the opponent, but it's not as good as kind of like finishing off, killing someone quickly. This means that, and unfortunately, when he reached so it's really good at kind of making the game into a late game. The problem is like when the late game happens, it doesn't have all the answers that it needs to deal with the other late game decks whenever it plays against like a Kira or a Krennic Green. It plays all those massive stuff like the Avenger or the Snoke, and you don't have any ways to deal with them whatsoever. The best thing you have is just to playing out of aspect Slater Dragon, or to play something like Shoe Side, like really weird answers. And the problem is that this deck really struggles into the late game. So it's a deck that I think is it's better to kind of reorient the deck to be a bit more aggressive, a bit more tempo focused. And exactly what you are doing with Han Yellow. You are getting rid of the ramp, getting rid of the late game card, getting rid of the U-wing value, you're getting rid of the late game cards in the ramp, and you're getting instead tools to be more aggressive. You're getting Surprise Strike, you're getting Cunning, you're getting a lot of great cards against hard control as well, even though hard control is not really part of the meta at the moment. You're getting Cantina Bouncer, all those very important tempo tools that allows you to kind of tempo out the game. And I think really Han Yellow is going to be the way to move forward in this new meta. Especially if hard control start to become a thing, Han Yellow will be an excellent answers to it, because it's one of the best anti hard control deck that you can think of. And probably the reason why hard control did not see so much play in this tournament, because you were afraid of aggro and you were afraid of Han, and those two decks were very well represented in those meta. So now let's get into day 2. So in day 2, as you can see, quite a bit of a different meta. We got a lot more Bobas, a few Bosk there, but mostly a lot of Bobas. We got one Cad Bane, but yeah, overall Bobas, and the top 8 is extremely diverse. We got Ophir Maram, which by the way is the player Wu. He has his own YouTube channel, so check it out. Very excellent player, of course, taking number 1, only player with 7-0 record, playing the Kira ECL deck. Then we got a Krennic green. So once again, the Krennic being represented in top 8 again. Han Yellow, Troy once again making a top 8 performance. Well done to him. And then we got one Boba Yellow, Krennic green again. So 2 Krennic greens in top 8. And a Sabine ECL, a Palpatine Yellow, and an Hondo Ohnaka blue. Very interesting deck. This deck went to top 8 with a 5-2 record, but still impressive to see Hondo doing well. So very diverse top 8 this time around. Not as dominated by Sabine, and you can see Sabine makes the top 8 here. Sabine ECL makes the top 8, but overall doesn't see as much play. We see Boba Yellow mostly dominating this 5-2 record, as you can see here. So first I just want to take a look at the Kylo deck, mostly because I had the deck list. It made a top 11 with a 5-2 record. So Kylo is a deck that has been extremely, it's the most all-in, the most aggressive deck that you could even imagine. It's really much, I try to vomit my hand in the first two turns of the game, and then I deploy Kylo, and I try to attack with Kylo, and I try to win the game like that. So it's a very, very all-in, very, very brutal and aggressive deck, and this specific version here is very much focused on the combo. It's almost like a combo deck here with Toro. I don't like to call it combo. I will say there's just heavy synergies around Toro, because as you can see, he's playing a lot of very cheap bounty hunters, and the idea is you play Toro and then you play bounty hunters. You deal damage to it, you untap Toro, you attack, you play another bounty hunters, you untap Toro, you attack, and so on and so forth. And the idea is to kind of combo off like that. And then you can play Baiting 2 tubes, you get your attack Baiting 2 tubes, you get Rage 2 to Toro. Never mind, doesn't work on Toro. Yeah, that's an synergy. But you can give equipment to Toro, you can give Hotshot Deal to a 44 Blaster, you can give a Jetpack, and then suddenly it attacks 5/5/5 every time it untaps, and it can become very, very brutal. So it's a very, very aggressive, extremely aggressive deck. You got the Arm to the Teeth as well that can also boost Toro, and it's an extremely, extremely aggressive deck. So it's a cool thing. There's a couple of things that I'm a little bit. It plays a lot of cards that are not very strong. So if it does not draw the Toro, I can see this deck not performing super well. And so it's a bit eye-rolly in that sense. It plays almost exclusively on the ground, so Force Choke is very good because you get rid of the opponent cards for very cheap, and you can this is going to be super helpful. And yeah, it's really much tried to, if the specific version of the deck doesn't fight Toro, it's going to be in a lot of trouble. I'm relatively surprised to not see a Fallen Lightsaber. I found Fallen Lightsaber to be very good in Kylo Ren. The fact that you're always going to have a target to drop it on curve. On turn 2, you can drop your turn 3, you can drop your Fallen Lightsabers on Kylo, and can be very, very impactful. And it's not a bad card also to put on Toro, because you can untap Toro and attack and do some crazy stuff as well. So yeah, a bit surprised to not see that being more of a thing in this specific deck. But yeah, the rest of the deck makes a lot of sense. My opinion about this deck is it's a kind of a one-trick pony. It's if it goes off well, it can win games. But the opponent finds one card that you cannot deal with, one big answer that you cannot deal with, and you very much lost the game. So it's extremely all-in. It's extremely it's extremely like a risky way to play the game, but it can definitely work if you play it in the right situations. And if you are playing it and you get the right card, and your opponent doesn't get the right answers, it can very much win a game. So I just wanted to take a look at it and give you my opinion about the deck. So then we got another kind of out of the bush deck, which is the Hondo Ohnaka blue. which is very much what you would expect. Some of the kind of classic blue green white no blue green black shell, like kind of control shell. I mean, Hondo Ohnaka obviously it's a control deck because it's a deck that is playing mostly on the smuggle, and smuggle is more of a value tool, and it's very slow, but it gives you a lot of value over time as you get more and more smuggle cards. But it is quite expensive, so it's obviously a deck that wants to slow down the games and stuff. So, a couple of things about this. So, first of all, I completely disagree with ever playing any less than 3 Overwhelming Barrage. I think I still very much believe that Overwhelming Barrage is the best card in the game, and you should never play less than 3. Other than that, the deck plays a lot of smuggle cards. Some are really good, some not so good, but more kind of situational, like Vision Pursuit Craft. Even though the deck has very little space, so it kind of needs that kind of sentinel thing. Then you got your little Snoke, you got your Super Laser Blast, you get your Power of the Dark Side. So this is not too really big of a surprise. And you can see, in order to kind of use Hondo Ohnaka's ability as often as possible, you see George really much playing a lot of very cheap smuggle cards, timely interventions, covered strengths, collections, Star Hopper, a lot of very cheap smuggle cards. And I think this is a good bet because you play a lot of smuggle cards, allows you to use Hondo Ohnaka ability as often as possible, and get into the +1/+1 counters and get this engine going. I still believe it's a fairly low engine, but apparently it did work out in this game. As you can see, he has a very transformative sideboard where he has a lot of removal in the sideboard, but pretty much the entire sideboard is made out of removal. So it is very much a control deck. You see he's playing a lot of blue cards, so he can afford to play the Lucian Charleston. It's definitely a very cool deck. I mean, obviously, one top 8 performance with a 5-2 record. It's not really enough to establish this deck as being a meta deck or anything like this, but it's cool to see that people have managed to make Hondo Ohnaka sort of work. Does that mean the deck is going to be a force in the meta, or is it just an accident? Time will tell. I personally find this engine to be way too slow. The fact that you have to play all those pretty mediocre cards in order to make the Hondo Ohnaka's ability work. Hondo Ohnaka as a leader is not particularly impressive. 3/7 raid one. So personally, I'm not optimistic that this deck is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the meta. But it's cool to see that those rock decks doing well every once in a while. This is of course the sign of a good game where even those kind of decks can sometimes pull off some performances. So congratulations to George, and looking forward to see if this deck ever pulls out more performances in the future, because it would be very positive for the game. Because right now we've seen a lot of decks that are just basically just edited version of the old decks from Spark of Rebellion, but really brand new archetypes are still very much are still very rare. I was saying we see this with the Kylo deck, we see it with the Hondo Ohnaka deck, but those decks are not tier 1 deck by any means. That's the thing to take into account. And then we got the list of the winner here, Kira, list of Wu. So I very much agree with what he decided to play here. That's what you would expect from an ECL version of the deck, playing the Gideon Ask and those big 5 jobs to give them ambush. So it is pretty much what you would expect from the traditional sort of black, blue, green deck with the Chronix and all that. It's very much plays the same cards. The only exception would be the Enforcer that you play here. The Clune Enforcer is very good with Kira because it turns into a 3/2 shielded, which is extremely good at stabilizing the early stage of the game. So that's really helpful. That's one of the big reasons to play Kira, in my opinion. Yes, you do make your opponent draw a card when he dies, but it's okay because it did what it was supposed to do, was kind of stabilize the early game. He also likes to play a lot of diversity of late game cards, so then when you reach the late game, he kind of can get to choose which one he wants depending on the situation. I think I really like that approach, even though I rank Snoke so high that I play personally 3, but to be honest, it really depends on the deck. So he has like a collection of late game cards, and he can get this to kind of have the flexibility to decide whenever he which one he wants to play. So I like this very much. One thing that I've talked about with Wu about, and is like he's not personally a big fan of Rival's Fall, and he prefers to play Fel the Dragon instead. I personally strongly disagree with him. I think Rival's Fall is a better card than Fel the Dragon most of the time, especially in a meta where Boba Fett's armor exists, where you see those people playing dark sabers, where I think Rivals Fall is an incredibly good card. Uh, the flexibility of being able to kill large things and small things alike is just pretty important in my opinion. And the 2 discount resource that you get from Fells the Dragon compared to Rivals Fall is not super significant. Like, it is important, and like, it is a thing to take into account, obviously, but it's not like super crucial as opposed to all the advantages Rivals Fall has. So we'll see in the future which one prevails. Personally, I prefer Rivals Fall. He does play Fel the Dragon and did pretty well. I mean, the 2 cards are not very far off. So it's not because you play this card of the deck that turns into garbage. Like, it's just like preferences. I like I think Vigilance is a good card in this deck because Kira comes into play. She's gonna half the HP of everybody, so makes Vigilance finds a lot more target a lot easier. And then if you can kill something and heal with Vigilance, Vigilance becomes a spectacularly good card. So yeah, that just like, yeah, it's a pretty classic shell overall, but a very solid deck. Kira has proven to be a force to be reckoned with. In this mid-range thing, but as you can see in the tournament result, Chronic Green is also very much a thing. I feel like overall, the green, blue-black mid-range decks are just very good, and it's up to know. The future will tell whether Kira or Chronic will prevail into that shell, but it's not entirely clear which one is better, at least not to me. Now let's take a look for the day 3. For day 3, I got almost all the top A lists, especially excepted one. So we've got a few more lists to cover. This day 3 is a lot more dominated by Sabine and Boba. You can see here in top 8, 3 Boba, 2 Boba Yellow, 1 Boba Green, then a Sabine Yellow, a Sabine Han, a Sabine ECL, Han Blue making an appearance again, the new Han Blue, and then Han Yellow making an appearance again with a different player this time. And then we got, yes, just Sabine just being absolutely all over the place. Yeah, Sabine being absolutely all over the place. This, yeah, yeah, it's being very represented, but there's still some diversity here, into that. So we're gonna take a look at it. So first we got the Han Yellow list of Ian Klein. So he's playing a version of Han that is a bit more value focused with the C3PO R2D2 combo. So it's a bit more focused on value, as you can see. And this Rebel Shell allows you to play Wing Leader and a Fleet Lieutenant, so a bit of a different take on the deck, even though the fundamentals are still very much here. I'll play as a New Adventure. I haven't personally been a big fan of New Adventure in Han Yellow. Overall, a list that I like a little bit less than the list that we've seen before. I think R2D2 C3PO is excellent when you draw them together, and it's excellent in certain matchup, but against aggro it's very very slow. But here, playing the Fleet Units and the Wing Leaders allow you to counteract this a little bit. I like the Grogu in the sideboard. I mean, Grogu in the sideboard, Grogu has been kind of a weird card for me. I find the card very good when you can play it on turn 1, but then if you draw it any later than that, it becomes a lot worse. Yeah, and the rest of the deck is what you would expect. We got the Rogue Operative that is being played here as another 3-drop. You don't mind playing a lot of 3-drops in this deck because you can always use Han's abilities on turn 1, so you can play 3-drops on 1, 3-drops turn 2. And once again, a couple of minion Falcon, the Falcons, the 5/5 ambush Falcons here to get a little bit more. Personally, as additional like ambush units, I prefer to play the Azrain Gunship, and the reason for this is because I really very much fear Sabine, and the problem is, like, if you do not play Azrain Gunship against Sabine and you only rely on Falcon to stabilize the space arena, if you don't draw Falcon, you're pretty much dead. So I like to have the extra consistency of having the gunship to interact early on in space against a Sabine deck. Falcon intervenes a bit too late in the game for my taste, even though it has the advantage of being a smuggle card, which, as they say, is very important with the Han Yellow deck. Next we got Sabine Green. Actually, it's the first Sabine Green that we're covering today. We don't even have a sideboard. I'm not a big fan of that specific version because he does the deck of the core deck is pretty much classic, but he only plays 2 Wrecker, which in my opinion is wrong. I think 3 Dark Saber is too many. I've seen people doing this, and then you play only 2 copies for a cause I believe in, which for me is criminal. I mean, he does play a 8 non-heroism card in his deck because a non-heroism deck in his deck, so it does make can make the four cards I believe in less consistent. That is something to take into account. It makes the four cards a bit less consistent, but then yeah, I would rather just not play less heroism card and just play the full package of four cards I believe in. Timely Interversion is a card I talked about in Sabine. It has some advantages, some inconvenience. So my take on it is that I don't really like it, and the reason is because games are very, very short with Sabine, and Timely Interversion is very slow card because you need to have the full 5-drop and then pay an extra on top, like the Timely Reinforcement that you have to pay on top of it in order to be able to ambush with the card. So it becomes very expensive, and you don't really reach very often that stage of the game. And then we're talking about a card that obviously is a very bad top deck in a lot of situations, and a card that also disturbs for a cause I believe in. So I felt like the cost was not worth it. Daring Red also an excellent card in aggro, but here's the problem: is once again you're reducing the amount of non-resident card, making your focus I believe in it worse. So there's some give and takes here, but okay, well, that's pretty much my opinion. Finally, we don't have to about the core of the deck for very much what you would expect. Still playing Metal Ceremony, interestingly enough. I mean, it does play a lot of Rebels. It does have the Kato Onyo, which is also what I play in my version, which I like very much as an additional 2-drop. And yeah, cool. And then we got, once again, Rebel Resources, making it in the top 7, I believe. With his yellow deck, you know him. He's the most renowned Sabine Yellow players. He pretty much only exclusively played this deck. He has his own YouTube channel called Rebel Resource, so check it out if you want to know more about this deck. And this time, he plays something a little bit more different than what he brings in the Take the Initiative tournament, with something a little bit more, I would say, a little bit less all-in than he used to. Like, he doesn't play the sneak attacks anymore. He's a little bit less all-in. And he has more of a kind of a lower curve, doesn't play the Poe anymore, which I think is correct. I think especially if you're not going to be running sneak attack anymore, then the not playing Poe makes a lot of sense. And very, very tempo focused. You get the Bamboozle as well, which I think can be quite good in current meta. There's a lot of experience token, a lot of a few expensive equipment which are very good to Disturbed, and the tap effect is just solid in aggro deck, and the fact that you can just discard a yellow card to be able to play that. If it's in my opinion, one of the few decks that can really play Bamboozle and make huge value out of it, because it's so quick and so all in. So it is something I've said about Sabine Yellow. Whether is Sabine Yellow or Sabine Green the best deck? In my opinion, I think Sabine Green is better in a vacuum, but Sabine Yellow might be better positioned in the meta, because I believe that, for example, Sabine Green versus Sabine Yellow, Sabine Yellow has the advantage. This is what might explain why we've seen so many Sabine Yellow in this tournament, is that Sabine Yellow versus Sabine Green, I think Sabine Yellow has the advantage because of the 5 extra HP on the base. So it is a good call in my opinion to be bringing a Sabine Yellow if you expect a lot of Sabine Green. But overall, so my opinion is, even though Sabine Green might be the best deck in the vacuum, Sabine Yellow might be better positioned in the current meta. This is kind of what I believe, even though. And this is interesting when you see that it's not necessarily the deck that plays the best card that wins. It's also you have to take into account the game plan. It's like, what is the game plan that this deck has? And I think the game plan of Sabine Yellow does beat the game plan of Sabine Green, because Sabine Green got all those massive ambush cards, the Wreckers, you got the pull down run, and those are excellent cards in almost every matchup. But against Sabine Yellow, it's not that useful. So that's a big advantage they get, and then you get to the 5 extra HP, the extra being it's extra more, a little bit more aggressive. That also helps out a ton. Then we got the Han Blue, which is kind of the new way to play blue, white, red now, and it is a deck that I think has legs. This version is very cool because he plays the Karabast thing, so you deal damage to your own troops using Han, and then you can use Karabast as a removal that can deal 3 damage for 2, which I think is quite cool. Is quite cool. I think the deck is overall pretty well built. This is what you would expect. It even plays the Pillage. It still plays the Forthos. You see, it's very similar to the classic Ray that we've seen very early on in meta. Seen a lot of play, but this time it plays. But it does play a few synergies with Han. We plays, for example, Chewbacca, which I think is pretty much unplayable outside of Han, but in Han it becomes a lot better because you can play it for cheaper, and the 2 damage that you deal to Chewbacca is significant because he has so much health, and he even get grit to get a 6 attack. He can be smuggled, which I think is great. So I think it's a very cool deck. I would really much like to give it a try personally and see how it performs. By far my favorite deck of it in terms of like originality um, I think this deck is really cool. So, but yeah, it's very similar. It's not revolutionary. It's very similar to the red deck that we've seen coming up. It just fixes one of the big issues that the Ray deck has, is like it's a little bit slow. It's a little bit too slow. And Han gives you that speed that you need. It gives you this extra humph of speed, being able to play your cards earlier and get so many very high health units that basically dealing damage to them is not really that big of a deal. And you see he has so many late game cards, but actually if you think about it, the curve is not that bad because you can play Luke 1 turn earlier, you can play those Mace Windows 1 turn earlier, you can play the Redemption 1 turn earlier, and Chewbacca same, and also the Krayt Dragon. So I think it's a very cool deck. I'm excited to see if it's going to be part of the meta. It would be, if in my opinion, it is probably the best blue-white deck in the meta right now. And I'm also excited to see if Karabas really works if I try it out myself. Even though I had the idea before to play this card, I thought it to be a little bit too situational. Because at the end of the day, you still need to have a unit into play to be able to use it and stuff, and it only deals 3 damage, which doesn't really kill that many things. But yeah, definitely excited to give it a shot and see how it goes. Pretty cool deck. Then we got the only Boba Green that actually made a significant performance in this tournament here, with I think it was Andrew Cox, the player of this. He went top 3 with this, and he basically plays the Bazine, a more controlly version of Boba Green. It is definitely more control focus. As you can see, plays the Ram, no surprise strike. Early game, Salacious Crom McClunky combo to deal with the early save of the game in order to stabilize and use this as a removal. And then later on, it plays a lot of late game plays, both Darth Vader and Darth Maul in this specific list, which I think is a bit awkward for the curves. It's a lot of 7 drops that you're gonna get. But at least you can resource your 7 drops relatively aggressively and still going to have good chances to find the 7 drops anyway. And even play the Reinforcement Walker. So definitely kind of a more controlly version of Boba Green that we've seen before. And once again, you get the Hotshot, the DR-44 Blaster, still seeing play in that version as well. Yeah, so yeah, cool deck. Very, as I said, a bit more focused on the control aspect. And here next we got Zach, who's playing Boba Yellow. So this version is a lot more bounty hunter focused in order to abuse Toro Calican. So it's pretty much like a bounty hunter deck almost, as he's playing both 4 LOMs, 3 copies of Relentless Pursuit, the 3 copies of Bounty Guild Initiate, which is a card I was definitely not expecting to see a lot of play in this tournament, but we see quite a few players actually applying it, and even playing as far as the Ruthless Assassin in order to get even more bounty hunters. So I don't know how powerful that package is, but it is definitely interesting. He plays the whole 9, 4 LOM, Bosk, Zuckus, and the bounty hunter crew. So yeah, he does really play a lot of bounty hunters in this specific version. So it is basically Boba Yellow bounty hunters. And he came out second of the tournament. And then at the first place, we got the winner here with a bit more of a classic version on the Boba Yellow. We'll see once again Mercenary Gunship making a comeback in the specific versions. The Outshot DR-44 Blasters is really starting to become an established thing for the deck. I personally find it better than the Jetpack. There are of course situations where Jetpack is better, but I prefer overall the Blaster. And then he also plays a New Adventure, which is a card that's been kind of a hit and miss. We've seen some people running it, some people not running it. I like to run 2 of it personally because I find it so incredibly powerful with Fast Fire Spray. Whenever I have a New Adventure in hand and a Fast Fire Spray, I feel like I cannot lose the game. So I find this is to be so powerful that it's very much worth running. Yeah, the version is, in my opinion, as close as it gets to my personal version that I run. And probably what's going to be the kind of the most classic way to play Boba Yellow moving forward. Yeah, the bodyworks are now going into the sideboard. We've seen very few people playing hard control overall. So Moving on now to what we can learn from this tournament. So first thing is that the whole Han Yellow is an excellent deck, and it's probably the way to play Han Green moving forward, because the game plan just makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more aggressive. It's capable of ending games, while Han Green does not have the late game answers to deal with a lot of the new late game cards. Like Han Green really much concedes on an unanswered Snoke, stuff like that. And I think Han Yellow is going to be the way to play the deck moving forward. The meta game is still diverse. There's still a lot of diversity to the meta. I don't think anybody at this stage can say that the meta is less diverse than the one of Spark of Rebellion. However, what is a little bit disappointing in my opinion is that most of the decks that we are seeing are just slightly different, an updated version of the old decks. If you take a look at what the new decks that could have come out and the old decks, very much the updated version of the old decks are just so much stronger than the old decks that have been updated. We don't see the crazy bounty bounty Bosk deck. We don't see the equipment. Kalatan deck, Bo Kalatan deck. We don't see the equipment. I forgot the name. Gar Saxon deck. We're not seeing any of the new deck really making a breakthrough in the meta. It's just very much old decks. There's a few exceptions. We got a Hondo Ohnaka who did a good result. But most of the decks that we are seeing in the meta are just basically old decks that have been updated. I also see that most of the... there's basically two new decks in the meta. It's basically the Hold Han Yellow, which was not really a thing in Spark of Rebellion, and then the new Han Blue. Those are basically the two decks that I think are going to be strong meta decks that are going to see play. But outside of those two decks, it's just basically all decks updated, which is a bit disappointing because it does not make the new meta feel fresh. From almost double the card pool being made, like almost the card pool expanded in size by twice, by 100%. You would have expected more unique deck, more archetypes that are really much focused on what the Shadow of the Galaxy mechanics are trying to push forward. So the blue, white, red shell. So people have been talking about whether it's going to be Chirrut, Luke, Rey, or the new Han, and it seems like new Han is taking the cake, at least for now. The young Han seems to be the best way to play this shell, as opposed to the other one. They all play kind of similar cards, but young Han just has this advantage of the speed, the speed that it gives you, the fact that you can play those cards earlier in exchange of damage is extremely valuable. Other things that I've observed, I found Bosks to be widely underrepresented in this tournament. No Bosk whatsoever being played. Once again, we don't have the full data of the tournament. I don't know if the Bosk were just simply not performing well, or if they were just simply not being played. So kind of my theory about that is that I think a lot of people were afraid of Sabine and aggro in general, and Bosk as kind of the same problem. Bosk ramp as kind of the same weakness as Sabine, is like it doesn't have any way to win life, to gain life. But I would say Bosk is significantly better compared to the old Vader ramp deck at actually dealing with aggro, because Bosk of course deploys earlier. It has a better early game with all those bounties. It can really use that as removal and kind of ram fast. It also ramps faster. So I would say Bosk overall is a better deck against aggro. It also has access to better space units, notably with the TIE Silencer or the 3-2 in space. I forgot the name. The pirated starship, whatever. Anyway, it has more interactions in space early on in the game. So that I think is something to give it to. So I think even though yes, aggro is very representative, I feel like Bosk has a lot more chance against aggro than the old Vader, and I think against anything else than aggro, Bosk is an absolute monster. It's a very, very strong deck. So excited to see if this deck is going to see a bit more play moving forward. Kira is good, but so is Krennic. So we see both Kira Green and Krennic Green putting some significant results in this tournament. I mean, most of the K2OD crew was playing Kira Green, so a lot of good players were playing Kira Green. So that also might have inflated those results, or maybe not. Maybe it's just a very, very good deck. Anyway, those two decks are very similar from one another, so it's going to be kind of the same debate as whether Krennic or Hayden is better. I think now Everybody kind of acknowledged now that Krennic was the better card in the Krennic mid-range, in the mid-range green, black, blue shell. But now it's the debate between Kira and Krennic. Which one is better? Which of the two is better? I'm personally gonna give it a lot more playtest, and I'll give my opinion, my final opinion about this once I played a lot more with it. Set one. So set one leaders. Sorry, I forgot the word leaders here. Set one leaders see little to no play. So basically, okay, so yeah, this is completely wrong. It's set two leaders see little to no play. I'm sorry about that. So what I'm trying to say here is that if you look at the breakdown of set one leaders being played compared to set two leaders, set one leaders see so much more play than set two leaders, which is what I predicted when I did my my set two leaders tier list. I've said set two leaders are not even close to be on the same level as set one leaders, and that's a little bit disappointing. Once again, I found that I feel like the FFG dropped the ball a little bit on the design of a lot of the leaders of set two. I feel like the set two leaders are simply just not that very good, and it even gets worse. I was personally expecting Rey to be a bit better, and even Rey seems to not be good enough to be played at a competitive level, and it's really overall means that set two leaders are simply just not that competitive for the most part. The only set two leaders we're seeing is Kira, but once again, Kira is just only a slight improvement over Krennic, if it is even an improvement over Krennic. Han, the young Han is really the only a real new thing that is coming to the set in terms of leader that is really bringing something to the table. And that's it for this video. So thank you so much for following this tournament report. I hope that you've learned some things. I'm still on holiday, so I'm not taking any any coaching for that period in time, and I'll still try to drop some videos, but expect them to be fewer and far between than usual. And thank you so much for following that video, and I'll see you next time.